It was a grey and gloomy morning, with heavy clouds hanging low in the sky, promising an imminent storm over the small and peaceful town. The streets were still quiet, except for the occasional sound of a passing car or the distant bark of a dog. In this setting, a young man was starting his day. Lucas lived alone in a modest apartment located in a quiet neighborhood where every house seemed to tell its own old story. His apartment, a small studio on the top floor of a time-worn building, was his refuge and his world. The space was modestly furnished with a single bed, a work desk cluttered with papers and books, a small kitchen, and a cramped bathroom. The time-worn walls displayed a few black and white photographs of urban landscapes and one or two posters of rock bands. One of the walls was dominated by a large window that, on that morning, revealed a stormy sky. Lucas was a young man in his early 20s, of average height, with messy brown hair that often fell over his serious eyes. His brown eyes, almost always thoughtful, reflected an old and contemplative soul. He worked as an assistant in a small accounting firm in the city center, a job he did not love, but that paid the bills. Lucas's life was routine and solitary. He didn't have many friends, and his family lived in another city. His mother, with whom he maintained regular contact by phone, always expressed concern about his reclusive lifestyle. Lucas, however, found comfort in his solitude. He enjoyed spending his evenings reading fiction books or watching old movies. On weekends, he dedicated himself to photography, walking through the city streets and capturing scenes of urban life. That morning, as he prepared for work, Lucas felt a sense of unease. The approaching storm seemed to mirror his own inner state, a mix of restlessness and melancholy. Putting on his coat and grabbing his backpack, he readied himself to face the day. His apartment, usually a sanctuary of peace, felt strangely oppressive that morning. Before leaving, Lucas took one last look at his apartment and briefly considered calling his mother later, just to reassure her that he was fine. Closing the door behind him, he found himself in the dark, deserted hallway of the building. As he descended the stairs, each step echoed in the silence, accompanied by his own thoughts. Outside, the storm began to manifest. The wind howled through the streets, carrying leaves and small debris. The rain started to fall, first lightly, then increasingly heavier. Lucas adjusted. He pulled up his hood and started his walk to work, his quick and determined steps splashing through the forming puddles. As he walked, Lucas pondered his life. He wondered if he should do more, connect more with people and live differently. However, these thoughts were always fleeting, disappearing as quickly as they came. During this morning reflection, Lucas saw a soaked and shivering figure in the distance. It was an elderly homeless woman, well known in the neighborhood. He had seen her many times before, but that day, under the torrential rain, something changed in him. A wave of compassion and concern washed over him, and he knew he couldn't just pass by her as he had on previous occasions. On that rainy morning, Lucas decided he would do something different, something that might change the course of his day and perhaps his life. The storm intensified, with the wind blowing relentlessly and the rain pounding the sidewalks like a chaotic symphony. With his face partially covered by his hood, Lucas pushed against the storm, his thoughts immersed in the worries and routines of daily life. But in this tempestuous setting, his eyes fixed on a solitary and fragile figure, an elderly woman huddled under a small shelter. Makeshift shelter composed of a few cardboard boxes and an old tattered umbrella. The elderly woman, whose name Lucas didn't know, was a familiar presence on the neighborhood streets. She appeared to be around 80 years old, with deep wrinkles that told the stories of a long and undoubtedly difficult life. Her hair, now grey and matted, clung to her face from the weight of the rain. Her eyes, which might have once been bright and full of life, now seemed dull and distant. She wore several layers of worn and dirty clothes that barely provided any protection against the biting cold of the storm. Lucas had seen the woman many times before. On some occasions, he had given her a few coins or a hot coffee, but he had never stopped to really talk to her. There was always an excuse: hurry, fatigue, or simply the reluctance to face the uncomfortable reality of her situation. But that day, something inside him stirred. Seeing her there, so vulnerable under the relentless rain, Lucas felt a wave of sadness and compassion. He approached her slowly, the sound of his footsteps muffled by the rain. The woman looked up at him, her grey eyes meeting his. For a moment, it seemed like time stopped, and all that existed was that silent, piercing gaze. Lucas realized that despite her worn and fragile appearance, there was an inherent strength and an unshakable dignity within her. "Are you okay?" Lucas asked, his voice nearly lost in the wind. The woman just looked at him without responding. She was trembling, her wrinkled hands tightly clutching the wet fabric of her clothes. Lucas knelt beside her, offering a gentle smile. "I live nearby. Would you like to come with me to get warm and out of this rain?" She watched him for a long moment, as if assessing his intentions. Then, with an almost imperceptible nod, she accepted his offer. Lucas helped her to her feet, noticing how fragile and light she seemed. Together they walked slowly through the flooded streets, Lucas guiding her with care and respect. As they walked, he wondered about her story, who she was, what circumstances had led her to live on the streets, and whether there were worried family members searching for her. He felt a mix of curiosity and sadness, a desire to understand and perhaps help alleviate the burden of this woman whom fate had placed in his path. The rain continued to fall, and the wind howled between the buildings. But in that moment, Lucas felt a quiet determination. He was about to do something meaningful, something that would transcend the monotony of his daily existence. On that stormy day, the lives of Lucas and the elderly woman intertwined in ways neither could have predicted. As Lucas guided the elderly woman through the muddy, rain-soaked streets, a wave of emotions overwhelmed him. He vaguely remembered seeing the woman on several previous occasions, but always in passing, never really stopping to interact beyond a quick act of charity. She was almost a ghostly figure on the city sidewalks, a constant reminder of human fragility that most preferred to ignore. Lucas recalled a cold winter morning when he first saw her. She was sitting in her usual corner, wrapped in worn blankets, her eyes following the hurried passers-by. That day, he felt a pang of compassion and offered her some coins, which she accepted with a nod and a murmured thanks. He had then continued on his way, his discomfort with the situation quickly replaced by the demands of his day. But now, as he walked beside her in the storm, Lucas could no longer ignore the reality in front of him. The proximity and the act of physically caring for her made the situation intensely real. He felt the weight of her fragility and the injustice of a life that had brought her to this state of vulnerability. The sadness Lucas felt was multifaceted. There was pity, yes, but also a deep sorrow for living in a world where someone like her could be left at the mercy of the elements, of nature and human indifference. He thought about his own life, his complaints and problems, which suddenly seemed trivial in comparison. The elderly woman represented a reality he was aware of, but rarely confronted: the existence of people who, for various reasons, ended up forgotten on the fringes of society. As they walked, the rain seemed to intensify, mirroring the whirlwind of thoughts and emotions inside Lucas. He worried about the woman's health, wondering when she last had a hot meal or a dry place to sleep. His mind filled with unanswered questions. Where was her family? Did she have children? Who was she before becoming just another shadow on the streets? Lucas also questioned his own motivations. Why, after all these casual encounters, had he decided to help her that day? Was it the severity of the storm, his own loneliness, or something deeper? A desire to connect and make a difference even in a small way. He realized that in his attempt to help her, he might also be searching for something undefined within himself. Understanding, redemption, a sense of purpose. When they reached the front of the building where Lucas lived, he hesitated for a moment. The reality of bringing a stranger into his home hit him, but as he looked at her, drenched and shivering, he felt a renewed determination. As he trembled, any lingering doubts vanished. He was committed to his decision, driven by a compassion that surpassed his initial concerns. Climbing the stairs of the building with the elderly woman by his side, Lucas felt a blend of apprehension and resolve. He was about to enter unfamiliar territory, but he was determined to do good, regardless of the consequences. This moment would not only define the day, but possibly the direction of his life moving forward. As Lucas opened the door to his building with the elderly woman beside him, he was enveloped in a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The decision to bring a complete stranger, especially someone in such a vulnerable state, into his home was not something he had taken lightly. There was a mix of uncertainty and determination in his movements, a sense of stepping into unknown territory that was both frightening and profoundly human. The building where Lucas lived was old, with walls bearing the marks of time and an elevator that was more often broken than functional. Ascending the stairs slowly and carefully, he wondered about the implications of his actions. What would his neighbors think when they saw him bringing a homeless woman into the building? Bringing someone from such a different world into his personal space. However, these concerns were quickly overshadowed by the pressing need of the situation. The woman was trembling uncontrollably. Her lips were blue from the cold, and her skin had the pallor of someone who had gone without proper care for a long time. Lucas knew that regardless of the potential social or personal consequences, he could not simply ignore the human need before him. Upon reaching his apartment, Lucas opened the door and invited the woman inside. The space was modest, with simple furniture and minimal decoration, but it was clean and inviting. It offered a stark contrast to the storm raging outside. "Please, make yourself comfortable," Lucas said, closing the door behind them and removing his soaked coat. "I'll get some dry clothes for you." The woman looked around, her eyes timidly exploring the unfamiliar surroundings. There was a look of hesitation on her face, as if she were trying to understand how she had ended up there and what this act of kindness meant. Lucas went to his bedroom and retrieved a few garments that had belonged to his grandmother. They were simple but warm and comfortable. He briefly remembered his grandmother, a strong and kind woman who had always taught him the importance of compassion and caring for others. She would have done the same, Lucas thought, feeling a connection to his grandmother's memory through this act of generosity. Returning from the bedroom, he handed the clothes to the woman. "Here, these should fit." "I'll make us some hot tea," he said, trying to bring a sense of normalcy to the situation. As the woman went to the bathroom to change, Lucas headed to the kitchen. His heart was pounding with a mix of anxiety and satisfaction. He was doing something good, something significant, but he was also stepping into unknown territory. While preparing the tea, he pondered what might come next. How could he assist this woman beyond providing temporary shelter? Was there a way to reconnect her with her family or find long-term support? When the woman returned, now dressed in Lucas's grandmother's warm, dry clothes, there was a faint hint of comfort in her eyes. Lucas directed her to a spot on the sofa and served the tea. Sitting in silence, with the sound of the rain tapping against the windows, they seemed to reflect on their respective journeys. He, on the path that led him to open his home and heart, and she perhaps on the winding roads life had taken her. The elderly woman, now clad in the cozy clothes that once belonged to Lucas's grandmother, sat quietly on the sofa. Her body still shivered slightly, a mix of the previous cold and the strangeness of being in such an unfamiliar environment. Lucas watched her with a mix of concern and curiosity. Her presence in his apartment, a place that had always been his private sanctuary, introduced a new dynamic to the space, filling it with a palpable sense of humanity and vulnerability. As the tea grew cold on the coffee table, Lucas struggled to find the right words. He wanted to offer comfort, but was also eager to learn more about the woman he had brought into his home. "Would you like some tea?" he asked, breaking the silence. His movements were gentle and careful, as if he were navigating unfamiliar territory. The woman managed a faint smile on her chapped lips, and there was a glimmer in her eyes that seemed to express gratitude, a warmth that transcended words. Lucas poured her a cup of tea, watching her hold the mug with trembling but steady hands. The steam from the hot tea rose, mingling with the warm atmosphere of the apartment. As the mood became slightly more relaxed, Lucas attempted to start a conversation. "My name is Lucas," he began softly. "What is your name?" His voice was gentle, trying not to overwhelm or intimidate his fragile guest. The woman looked at him, her eyes wandering as if she seemed lost in a sea of distant memories. "Mariana," she murmured, finally adding a hint of uncertainty to her voice. "Mariana is a lovely name," Lucas noted. He observed that hearing her name seemed to bring a trace of recognition to her face, as if that simple act of acknowledgement provided her with some grounding in the present. Lucas continued the conversation with simple, direct questions, being careful not to overwhelm her. "Do you have any family around here, Mariana?" His approach was gentle, aware that any memory might be both painful and comforting. Mariana looked at him, her eyes filling with a mix of confusion and effort to recall. "I don't know," she said softly, her voice tinged with the heavy fog of forgetfulness. Recognizing her struggle, Lucas decided not to press further with questions. Instead, he focused on making her stay as comfortable as possible. "If you need anything else, please let me know," he said, offering a reassuring smile. Lucas felt a surge of responsibility toward Mariana. He knew he couldn't solve all her problems, but at least for that day, in that moment, he could provide her with shelter from the storm, both literal and metaphorical. It was a new feeling for him, a blend of altruistic concern and a profound realization. As Mariana finished her tea, Lucas pondered what more he could do. He considered reaching out to social services or finding organizations that might offer long-term assistance. He understood that the solution wouldn't be straightforward, but was determined to help in any way he could. That day, Lucas's small apartment became more than just a physical space. It transformed into a place of human connection, where solidarity and compassion were expressed in a simple yet deeply meaningful way. After the brief moment of comfort provided by the warm tea, Lucas realized he was facing a new challenge: communicating with Mariana, the elderly woman who seemed shrouded in a fog of forgetfulness. He knew that interacting with someone who might be experiencing memory loss would require patience, sensitivity, and an implicit understanding that not all questions would have answers. Sitting across from Mariana, Lucas started the conversation with straightforward and gentle questions. "Do you remember anything about your family?" he asked, hoping not to touch upon any hidden wounds. Mariana looked at him, her eyes wandering as she struggled to grasp fragments of memory. "I don't know," she murmured, her words filled with uncertainty. Filled with frustration and a hint of sadness, Lucas noticed how difficult it was for Mariana to access her memories, a struggle that seemed to overwhelm her. Deciding to change his approach, Lucas tried discussing lighter topics. "Do you like music?" he asked, hoping to find common ground or trigger a positive memory. Mariana nodded slightly. "Music, yes," she responded, and for a brief moment, A glimmer of recognition appeared in her eyes. Lucas realized that while her memory was elusive, certain stimuli, like music, could provide temporary comfort. Inspired by this, he got up and turned on the radio, tuning it to a station that played soft classical music. The melody filled the room, creating a soothing atmosphere. Mariana closed her eyes and gently swayed to the music. As Lucas observed her, he wondered about the stories and experiences she held within, stories that might never be fully revealed. After a while, he asked, "Do you enjoy cooking?" seeking another way to engage with her. Mariana opened her eyes, looking puzzled. "Cooking?" she repeated, as if the word was distant and vague. Lucas realized that each attempt at conversation felt like navigating an unknown sea, where each wave might bring something new to the surface or simply mirror the confusion. Realizing the emptiness, Lucas decided that instead of pressing her memory, he would simply be present, offering support and companionship. As the afternoon passed, Lucas and Mariana spent time together, alternating between comfortable silences and occasional attempts at conversation. Lucas spoke about simple things like the weather, his plants on the windowsill, or a book he was reading. Mariana listened, sometimes with a faint smile, and other times with a thoughtful expression, as if she were trying to piece together a life that seemed to be slipping away. During these moments, Lucas sensed the depth of Mariana's isolation. She seemed like a distant island, separated from the world by the fog of memory loss. He felt a mix of compassion and determination, a quiet resolve not to let her face this journey alone. As the day turned to night and the storm outside began to subside, Lucas reflected on the unusual situation he found himself in. He didn't have all the answers or know exactly what the future held, but he knew that for now he had made the right decision by opening his door to her. It was a small gesture in the grand scheme of things, but for Mariana, it could mean the world. As the days went by with Mariana temporarily living in his apartment, Lucas began to adjust to her presence in his daily life. He became accustomed to making 2 cups of tea every morning and sharing quiet meals with her. Mariana, for her part, seemed to grow more comfortable in Lucas's apartment, even though the fog of her memory remained dense and impenetrable. One quiet morning, as Lucas was getting ready for another workday, he encountered an unexpected surprise. Entering the kitchen, he found Mariana standing by the stove, engaged in preparing what appeared to be a complex and sophisticated dish. She moved with a confidence and skill that sharply contrasted with the frailty she usually displayed. Lucas stopped at the kitchen entrance, both surprised and intrigued. "Mariana, what are you doing?" he asked, a smile of admiration forming on his lips. She turned to him with a slight smile and simply said, "Cooking." In her hands, she held a frying pan with practiced ease, deftly flipping the ingredients in the air. The delicious aroma of herbs and spices mingled, filling the apartment with a warm and inviting scent. Lucas approached, watching her cook. "This looks amazing. How did you learn to do this?" he asked, genuinely curious. Mariana shrugged, as if she couldn't quite explain. Lucas found it difficult to explain the source of her culinary expertise. "I just know," she replied, focusing on the food. As Mariana cooked, Lucas began to ponder the complexities of memory and identity. It was both fascinating and somewhat mysterious, how despite her apparent memory loss, Mariana retained such specific and intricate skills. He started to wonder about her past. Perhaps she'd been a chef or a cook, someone who had spent years honing her craft and developing a passion for cuisine. When the dish was ready, Mariana served it with a care that suggested pride. They sat down to eat, and Lucas was impressed by the flavor and quality of the food. For a brief moment, it felt as if the veil of amnesia had lifted, revealing the person Mariana once was. "You're an amazing cook, Mariana," Lucas complimented, savoring each bite. She smiled, a glimmer of satisfaction in her eyes. At that moment, Lucas realized that despite loss and forgetfulness, a person's essence, their passions, skills, and experiences can remain. This incident in the kitchen changed how Lucas viewed Mariana. He began to see her not just as an elderly woman in need, but as a person with a rich past and a story to tell, even if that story was locked away behind closed doors. Lucas felt a renewed determination to help her in any way he could, perhaps even aiding her in reconnecting with the parts of herself she had lost. From that day on, cooking became a regular activity for Mariana in Lucas's apartment. It brought her joy and a sense of purpose, and for Lucas, it was a glimpse into the world Mariana had once known. With each dish she prepared, he saw an untold story, a fragment of a life that, despite being forgotten, still had much to offer. The days with Mariana introduced a new routine into Lucas's life, filled with small discoveries and unexpected moments of joy. The culinary surprise had been just the beginning. One afternoon, as they shared the quiet comfort of the living room with the TV playing softly in the background, another revealing moment occurred. The TV was showing a variety show with a ballet performance. A ballerina gracefully moved across the screen, each step and turn in perfect harmony with the music. Lucas, half distracted by a magazine, noticed that Mariana was completely engrossed in the performance. Her eyes sparkled as she watched the dancer with an intensity he had never seen before. Suddenly, despite her advanced age and apparent fragility, Mariana began to mimic the dancer's movements. Mariana began by mimicking the ballerina's movements, initially just her arms rising and moving gracefully through the air. Then she stood up, her movements becoming more expansive, though constrained by her age and the confined space of the room. Lucas set aside his magazine, now fully focused on Mariana. He watched in astonishment and admiration as she replicated the ballerina's movements with a grace that spoke of past training and passion. Her gestures possessed a lightness and precision that transcended the modest living room. "Mariana," Lucas said gently, almost hesitating to interrupt the magic of the moment, "do you dance ballet?" She paused, looking at him with a soft, distant smile. "Ballet," she murmured, as if the word evoked echoes from a distant past. "I love to dance." Lucas felt a wave of emotion and curiosity. This new revelation opened another window into Mariana's mysterious past. "Were you a dancer?" he asked, encouraging her to share more. Mariana slowly shook her head, her eyes lost in memories. "I danced a long time ago," she said, her voice tinged with nostalgia and joy. In that moment, Lucas realized that Mariana was not just an elderly woman who had lost her way. She was a person with a rich past, full of art and passion. Dance, like cooking, was an integral part of who Mariana was, or who she had once been. In the following days, Lucas made a concerted effort to incorporate more music and dance into their daily routines. He bought several classical music CDs and occasionally tuned into dance programs on television for them to watch together. Each note and movement seemed to awaken something within her, bringing to the surface fragments of joy and identity that illness had obscured. These dance sessions became therapeutic, not only for Mariana but for Lucas as well. Witnessing her reconnect with aspects of her former life through music and dance was profoundly moving and enriching. Lucas began to view life from a different perspective, recognizing the significance of each moment and the hidden beauty in the untold stories of every individual. Mariana's journey, with her hidden talents revealed gradually, became a source of inspiration for Lucas. She taught him about the resilience of the human spirit and how art, whether through cooking or dance, can remain a beacon of identity and expression even when nearly everything else is lost. Inspired by these surprising revelations about Mariana's abilities, Lucas felt driven to embark on a new mission to uncover more about her past. He hoped to find her family or anyone who might know her story. He understood that it would be a challenging task, especially given Mariana's apparent amnesia, but something within him, perhaps the connection that had grown between them, compelled him to try. Lucas began his search with the limited information he had: Mariana's first name, her approximate age, and some hints about her past as a cook and dancer. With these details in hand, he decided to start locally in the neighborhood. First, he visited nearby businesses, showing a photo of Mariana he had taken with his phone. He asked shop owners, local cafe patrons, and even passers-by on the street if they recognized her or had any useful information. However, no one seemed to know her or provide any helpful leads. Some recalled seeing an elderly woman wandering the streets, but nothing more. Undeterred, Lucas broadened his search. He explored online records, scouring social media and missing persons' websites in hopes of finding any trace of Mariana or her family. He also visited nursing homes and community centers, showing Mariana's photo and inquiring if anyone recognized her or knew anything about her past. During his quest, Lucas gained a deeper understanding of the complex realities faced by the elderly. Lucas reached out to support organizations and assistance groups, sharing Mariana's story in hopes that someone might provide information or guidance. Despite his efforts, leads remained sparse. He navigated a maze of bureaucracy and dead ends, with each closed door seemingly bringing him back to square one. Yet, he refused to give up. Each failed attempt reminded him of Mariana's face, her silent dance in the living room, and her frail hands in the kitchen, reminders of a life that deserved to be honored and understood. In a final effort, Lucas decided to create and distribute flyers featuring Mariana's photo. He placed them around the city, at bus stops, parks, and community centers, along with a contact number and a request for any information about her. Each passing day, Lucas held on to the hope of receiving a call or message that might lead to a breakthrough regarding Mariana. However, responses were few, often limited to expressions of sympathy and well wishes. This quest for answers provided Lucas with not only a deeper understanding of the reality faced by many elderly individuals, but also a profound sense of resilience. As he cared for Mariana, Lucas began to appreciate even more the moments they shared, understanding that while her past remained a mystery, her presence was a gift that continued to enrich his life. Despite the limited success of his searches for clues about her past, Lucas maintained his routine with Mariana. One night, as they watched an old movie on television, Mariana, who usually stayed quiet, turned to Lucas with a new expression on her face, a blend of clarity and confusion. "Alberto," she said suddenly, looking directly at him, "you're back." Taken aback by the sudden shift in her demeanor, Lucas responded cautiously. "Mariana, I'm Lucas. Are you feeling all right?" She continued to gaze at him, her eyes filled with an emotion he couldn't quite interpret. "Alberto, I knew you'd come back," she insisted, her voice trembling with an emotion that seemed to stem from a distant memory. In that moment, Lucas realized that Mariana might be reliving a fragment of her past, possibly a moment with someone significant to her. He decided to go along with the conversation, hoping to uncover more about her. "Tell me about Alberto," he said. Lucas gently asked Mariana, sitting closer to her. As Mariana seemed to delve deeper into her memories, she began to speak. "Alberto was my husband. We had a house with a beautiful garden. He loved that garden," she said, a sad smile forming on her lips. Lucas listened attentively, absorbing every word. This was the first time Mariana had spoken about her past in such detail. "Do you remember where this house was?" he asked hopefully. Mariana appeared to struggle to recall, furrowing her brow in concentration. It was a big house with roses. I loved the roses, she said vaguely. Encouraged by this revelation, Lucas began to talk with Mariana more often about her husband Alberto and their house with the rose garden. He took notes, hoping to find any clue that could lead to more information about her identity and past. In the following days, he tried searching online using the details Mariana provided, looking for any record of an Alberto, married to someone named Mariana, who had lived in a large house with a rose garden. It was a challenging search, given the limited details and the uncertainty of Mariana's memories, but Lucas was determined to follow every lead. Each fragment of memory Mariana shared was like a piece of a complex, blurry puzzle, and Lucas knew that her memories could still hold valuable clues. Distorted by time and illness, but he also believed that hidden truths lay within the depths of her words. This new focus on Mariana's memories of her husband Alberto and their house with the garden brought a new dynamic to their relationship. Lucas was no longer just a caregiver. He had become a detective of Mariana's past, a listener of her fragmented stories. For Mariana, these moments of reminiscence seemed to bring a blend of joy and pain, a reunion with a past she had largely forgotten. Lucas understood that the journey to uncover Mariana's past would be filled with uncertainties and might never lead to clear answers. Nevertheless, he was committed to continuing, driven by the desire to restore at least a part of the identity and history Mariana had lost. Lucas persisted in his conversations with her, increasingly focused on piecing together fragments of her memories. One particularly quiet afternoon, as they were looking through an old photo album Lucas had found at a flea market, hoping to spark Mariana's recollections, she suddenly pointed to a picture of a house with a large garden. "It looks like our house," she murmured, touching the photo with trembling fingers. Lucas felt a surge of excitement. "Alberto?" Lucas asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Yes," Mariana replied. "The house where we lived. I remember it was on Acacia Street," she said with a clarity she rarely exhibited. Lucas quickly jotted down the name, Acacia Street. This was the first time Mariana had provided such a concrete detail, and he knew he needed to investigate, even though he wasn't sure if the street still existed or if the house was still there. The next day, Lucas set out with the address and began his search. Acacia Street was an old part of town, with houses dating back to the early 20th century. As he walked along the street, he looked for any house that resembled the one in the photo or had a garden with roses. After some time, he spotted a house that matched Mariana's description. It was an old building with a well-tended garden, and yes, there were roses. His heart raced with anticipation and nervousness as he approached the front door and rang the bell. A middle-aged man answered the door, his face showing surprise at seeing Lucas, a stranger, on his doorstep. "Sorry to bother you," Lucas began. "I'm looking for information about a woman who might have lived here. Her name is Mariana." The man frowned, a look of confusion crossing his face. "I don't know any Mariana. I've lived here for many years, and this house has been in my family for generations. Are you sure you have the right address?" Lucas felt a wave of disappointment, but tried not to let it deter him. "Can you tell me if you know of anyone named Alberto who lived in this area?" Lucas asked, clinging to the hope that the name might spark some recognition in the man. "Alberto?" The man seemed to think for a moment. "No, I don't know any Alberto. I'm sorry, I can't help you." After thanking the man for his time, Lucas stepped away, feeling disheartened. The lead that had seemed so promising had ended in a dead end. As he walked back down Acacia Street, he pondered his next steps. Perhaps Mariana's memory was mistaken, or maybe the house had been demolished or renovated over the years. Back at the apartment, Lucas recounted his visit to Acacia Street to Mariana, trying to mask his disappointment. Mariana listened, her face distant, as if she were trying to connect with a past that continued to elude her. Despite the setback, Lucas was not ready to give up. He understood that uncovering Mariana's past was important, not just for potentially reuniting with her family, but also for honoring the history of a woman whose life had been so rich and full of experiences. He committed to continuing his search, following any lead, however faint, in hopes of unraveling the mystery of Mariana's past. Lucas felt increasingly driven to unravel the mystery of Mariana's past. The memory of the middle-aged man who denied knowing any Mariana or Alberto lingered in his mind. Something about that interaction had sparked an intuition in Lucas, making him feel that there might be more to the story of the house and its inhabitants than the man was willing to reveal. Determined to uncover the truth, Lucas decided to visit Acacia Street once more. This time he brought Mariana along, hoping that her presence might trigger additional memories or provide some form of recognition. As they arrived at Acacia Street, Mariana scanned her surroundings with a distant look. When they approached the house with the rose garden, a look of recognition crossed her face. "This is the house," she murmured, her voice tinged with surprise and nostalgia. Encouraged by her reaction, Lucas rang the doorbell again. The same middle-aged man answered, his face showing surprise at seeing Lucas once more, now with Mariana. "Sorry to bother you again," Lucas said, "but I brought Mariana. She believes she lived in this house. Are you sure you don't remember her or a man named Alberto?" The man looked at Mariana, his eyes narrowing in a mix of suspicion and confusion. For a moment, it seemed as though he was on the verge of... He seemed about to close the door, but something made him hesitate. "I really don't know any Mariana," he began, but his voice wavered. Mariana, standing beside Lucas, stared at the man as if trying to connect with something deep within her memory. "Please," Lucas urged, "any information might help. She's lost and trying to find her way back." There was a long silence during which the man appeared to be grappling with his thoughts. Finally, he sighed, his resistance softening. "I'll tell you what I know," he said, opening the door for them. Once inside, the man began, "My name is Ricardo. I grew up in this house. My parents passed away a few years ago, and I inherited the property. I don't remember a Mariana or Alberto, but my father used to talk about a brother he lost touch with many years ago. His name was Alberto." Lucas and Mariana listened attentively. "Do you know what happened to this Alberto?" Lucas asked. Ricardo shook his head. "Not much. My father didn't speak about it much. It seemed to be a painful subject. He only mentioned that Alberto had married a woman who loved to dance, and that they moved away." Lucas felt a surge of hope. "This woman, she danced ballet?" "Yes, that's right," Ricardo confirmed. "My father used to say she was a lovely ballerina." They exchanged glances as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. "It's possible that Mariana is Alberto's wife, your aunt," Lucas suggested, looking at Ricardo and then at Mariana, whose eyes were now filled with tears. Ricardo gazed at Mariana, his eyes showing a mix of surprise and sadness. "If that's true," he began, his voice choked with emotion, I didn't know. My father never mentioned where they went or what happened to them." The revelation was both illuminating and sorrowful. While Mariana's memories remained unclear, the possibility that she might be part of Ricardo's lost family opened a new path in the search for answers. Lucas realized there was much more to uncover. Determined to continue exploring Mariana's past, he felt renewed hope in reconnecting the fragments of her life with the forgotten memories of a family that might still remember her. After Ricardo's revelation, Lucas felt he was closer to uncovering Mariana's past, though many questions remained. Decided to keep searching, he and Mariana walked the city streets again, retracing old paths in the hope of triggering more memories. One day, while passing through a familiar street, something remarkable happened. As they approached a small bakery, Mariana stopped abruptly, her gaze fixed on the display window. She murmured a name, Clara. Lucas watched intently, trying to understand. "Clara?" he asked. "Do you know someone named Clara?" Mariana, with a distant look, nodded slowly. "Clara, my daughter," she said, her voice heavy with emotion. Without hesitation, Lucas led Mariana into the bakery. The aroma of fresh bread and pastries filled the air, creating a warm and inviting atmosphere. A middle-aged woman behind the counter looked up as soon as her eyes met Mariana's. Shock and recognition spread across her face. "Mother!" the woman exclaimed, her voice trembling with disbelief. She rushed around the counter and approached Mariana, gazing at her as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Lucas and the other customers in the bakery watched, witnessing the emotional reunion. Mariana looked at the woman with a confused expression, but there was a glimmer of recognition in her eyes. "Clara, is that you?" Mariana said weakly. Clara, with tears in her eyes, responded, "Yes, Mother, it's me. Where have you been? We've been searching for you for so long." Turning to Lucas, Clara then asked how he had found Mariana. Lucas briefly explained how he had discovered Mariana on the streets and detailed her journey up to that point. As Lucas continued his search to uncover more about Mariana's past, Clara listened with tears streaming down her face. She shared that Mariana had disappeared years earlier following a car accident involving her older brother. They had searched tirelessly for her, but to no avail. After the accident, Mariana had never been the same. She began to lose herself and forget things. Clara's voice cracked as she said, "We thought we had lost her forever." Lucas realized that the pieces of Mariana's past were finally coming together. The accident had been a turning point that eventually led her to the streets, lost in her own mind. Clara invited Lucas and Mariana to sit down, offering them coffee and pastries as they talked. Clara went on to describe the family's struggles in the years following Mariana's disappearance, including how her older brother had become distant after the accident, and how their father had passed away while their mother had disappeared. Clara's face was shadowed with sadness as she spoke, reflecting the invasive nature of their efforts to reconnect. The conversation stirred deep emotions for everyone. For Mariana, despite her clouded memory, there was a clear sense of reconnection. For Lucas, it was the realization that his journey with Mariana had led to a profound discovery. As they left the bakery that afternoon, with Clara promising to care for Mariana and keep in touch, Lucas felt a blend of joy and sadness. He had helped reunite a family, but knew that his time with Mariana was nearing its end. Still, there was comfort in knowing that Mariana would now be with someone who loved and remembered the woman she once was. After the emotional reunion at the bakery, Clara invited Lucas and Mariana to her home to share more about the past and help reconnect Mariana with the life she had lost. Feeling part of the story now, Lucas accepted the invitation. At Clara's house, surrounded by photographs and mementos, the family's history began to unfold. With tears in her eyes, Clara revealed details about the tragic accident that had altered their lives. "It was a horrible day," Clara began. "Mom and my brother Ricardo were in the car. There was a storm and they had a terrible accident. Mom was never the same afterward. She started to lose herself. Her memory began to fail, and then one day she just disappeared." Lucas listened attentively, holding Mariana's hand as she seemed lost in fragmented thoughts. Clara continued, "Ricardo kept the house after our father passed away. I tried to help, Mom, but Ricardo insisted that he could take care of her. I never understood why he became so reclusive and distant." It was then that Clara revealed the darkest part of the story. After Mom went missing, I began to suspect Ricardo. He never made any effort to find her. Over time, I realized he wanted the house for himself. He knew that with Mom gone, he could claim the entire property. Lucas felt a surge of outrage. It was unbelievable that Ricardo could abandon his own mother, especially in such a vulnerable state. "Do you think Ricardo could have..." Lucas started but couldn't finish the thought. The idea was too overwhelming to grasp. Clara shook her head, her eyes filled with pain. "I don't know, Lucas, but since then I lost all contact with him. He turned into a stranger." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of the front door. Ricardo, Clara's older brother, walked into the room. The encounter was tense. Clara confronted Ricardo with her suspicions and accusations. Initially defensive, Ricardo eventually broke down under the weight of the truth. He confessed that after the accident, he was overwhelmed by the responsibility of caring for Mariana and consumed by greed. He admitted to abandoning Mariana to wander the streets in her confused state, justifying to himself that she would be found and cared for while he seized the opportunity for himself. He kept the house and even lied when he encountered Lucas and his mother, providing false details, believing they would never uncover the truth. To make matters worse, when he saw his mother again after all those years, he felt nothing at all. Horrified by the confession, Clara demanded that Ricardo leave the house immediately, threatening to call the police if he refused. Overcome with shame and regret, Ricardo left the house without saying a word. Lucas watched the scene unfold, holding Mariana's hand as she appeared confused and disturbed. He felt relieved that Clara had uncovered the truth, but was deeply saddened by the pain and betrayal Mariana had endured after Ricardo's departure. With tears in her eyes, Clara promised to care for Mariana. "She will always have a home with me," she assured. "I will make sure she is loved and respected, as she always should have been." For Lucas, this was a bittersweet conclusion. He felt a sense of relief knowing that Mariana was now in loving and secure hands. But he also knew that his journey with her was coming to an end. He had played a crucial role in reuniting Mariana with her daughter and uncovering the truth about her past, but it was now time to let her move forward with her family. In the days following the confrontation with Ricardo, Lucas observed a remarkable transformation in Mariana, although Mariana's memory remained hazy, a new light had emerged in her eyes, a kind of rebirth, thanks to her reunion with her daughter. Now, under Clara's loving care, Mariana was slowly beginning to reconnect with fragments of her past, finding comfort and security within her family. Lucas visited frequently, increasingly seen more as a family friend than as a caregiver. He watched with a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction as Clara patiently helped Mariana adjust to her new life. There were moments of pure joy, small victories when Mariana recognized an old object or recalled a piece of her past, and other times of sadness when confusion and forgetfulness overtook her once again. During one of these visits, while Lucas and Mariana were sitting in the garden, she looked at him with affection and said, "You are like a grandchild to me. Thank you for everything you have done." Mariana's words, simple yet deeply sincere, touched Lucas's heart. He realized the impact he had made on her life and how this experience had also changed his own. Clara, in turn, expressed her immense gratitude. "Lucas, you brought my mother back," she said, tears in her eyes. "We can never thank you enough." Lucas downplayed his role, feeling that he had simply done what was right. Lucas knew deep down that his journey with Mariana had been one of the most meaningful and transformative experiences of his life. He had started as a stranger trying to help an elderly lady in distress, and in the process found purpose, a profound human connection, and a richer understanding of life and its complexities. Over time, Lucas's presence in Mariana and Clara's lives became less necessary. Mariana was safe and content with her daughter, and Lucas felt it was time to return to his own life, carrying with him the lessons and memories of this extraordinary experience. On his final visit, Lucas said goodbye to Mariana and Clara with a mix of joy and sadness. "You will always hold a special place in my heart," he said, "and I will always be here if you need me." Mariana, with a sparkle in her eyes, gave him a tight hug and whispered, "My dear grandson," a phrase that meant more to Lucas than any title of honor. As Lucas left Clara's house, he felt different, more mature, wiser, and more aware of the value of compassion and kindness. He knew that while this chapter of his life was coming to a close, the story of Mariana would forever be a part of him, a cherished chapter in his own journey. He looked back one last time, seeing Mariana and Clara holding hands in the garden, a symbol of family and rediscovered love. With a gentle smile and a heart full of memories, Lucas turned and walked toward a new chapter in his life. He carried with him the certainty that every person has a story to tell, and that sometimes a small act of kindness can spark a wave of positive change. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel, like, and share it with your friends. Your support means a lot and helps us continue creating content that inspires and connects. See you next time.